What just came out of Chicago has everyone in disbelief. The kind of news that stops you mid-scroll and leaves the city holding its breath. For a team teetering between hope and frustration, this cuts deep. The timing, the stakes, the way one play can tilt the entire season. If you're part of this crew, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and join the conversation. This community runs on real fans like you. Now here's the truth, the player at the center of this story, Dayo Odeyingbo. He's the one who tore his Achilles in Sunday's 47-40 to win over the Bengals and will miss the rest of the season. That sentence lands like a blow, because this isn't a depth chart shuffle. This is a recalibration of an entire defensive identity that Ben Johnson and the staff have been trying to build. You remember why the Bears chased him. A big-ticket free agent. 3 years, $48 million, signed to bring edge pressure opposite Montez Sweat. A marketplace move with an actual plan behind it. Give Sweat the bite he needs on one side and let Odeyingbo come through as the complementary explosion on the other. In 8 games, it didn't become the seamless partnership the front office envisioned. 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits. Those numbers don't tell the whole story, but they underline the fragility of building rush depth on hopeful fit and potential. And fragile is the right word, because this locker room has been hammered on the edge already. Rookie Shemar Turner's ACL ended his season a week earlier. Dominique Robinson is limping through a high ankle sprain that's going to keep him out for weeks. That leaves the Bears clinging to Austin Booker and Daniel Hardy as the only healthy pass rushers outside of Sweat on the 53-man. That's not a sentence you want to read with a trade deadline looming at 4 p.m. ET on Tuesday. The immediate pressure is obvious. Roster construction is ruthless. In a league where half measures are exposed on film the next week, Ben Johnson, who's wrestling with defensive play calling and the need for consistent disruption, must answer 2 questions at once. Can he trust what's already on the roster? And what will the front office do to supplement it before the deadline? Sources like Ian Rappaport lit the fuse on this story, and the rumor mill that follows a Bears injury is already spinning. The conversation migrates fast from sympathy to strategy. Do you reach for a proven veteran and pay with draft capital? Do you look for a swap, a reclamation project, someone who can flash but might not solve the problem long-term? Or do you lean inward and let Austin Booker be the breakout narrative you hoped he'd become when the Bears drafted him in 2024? There are elite names attached to this market, the ones that make fans' heads turn. Trey Hendrickson, a known commodity, someone who can move the needle immediately. But the Bengals reportedly still want a first-round pick for him. First round equals heavy price, and Chicago's front office has to decide if a short-term push for 2025 is worth mortgaging future roster velocity. Then you have Kayvon Thibodeaux as a tantalizing target. Physically gifted former top 5 pick, still with the upside to be a transformative piece, but his price tag would likely be steep. There's an other lane of options too. Names like Jermaine Johnson II or Dremont Jones come up as more budget-friendly, realistic pieces. Players who can contribute without handing over future high picks. That's the chessboard the Bears executives will be staring at between meetings and film sessions, the balance of cap, picks, team control, and immediate need. But you can't ignore the analytics. Chicago entered Week 9 tied for the 3rd worst pass rush win rate in the league at 31% per ESPN Analytics. That metric is a cold mirror. It says the pass rush isn't getting home consistently. It says quarterback clean pockets are a problem. In the division where games twist on turnovers and pressure, that inefficiency bites. Yet on the other hand, Montez Sweat has shown flashes and recent form. He's ripped off 3 sacks in the last 3 games. He's leaned into the role the team paid for. If the Bears can find a reliable partner, not necessarily a superstar, but someone who can collapse the pocket and hold edges, the defensive structure Ben Johnson is sketching on the whiteboard remains salvageable. Then there's Austin Booker. He missed the first 7 games after an IR stint out of training camp and took time to climb back into playing condition. His return in Week 9 felt like a narrative pivot. The athletic one-armed bull rush that ripped the ball free from Joe Flacco and turned into a strip sack was more than a play. It was a message. Booker finished the game as the team's highest-graded defender, according to Pro Football Focus, a 90 overall grade with an 85.8 pass rush grade. That's the kind of performance that forces a team to reevaluate whether they need to spend big on the market or if internal growth can carry them through. But relying on potential is a risk. Relying on untested stamina across a season is another one. You can picture Ben Johnson sitting in meetings, flicking through film, speaking softly but emphatically about technique and gap discipline while someone behind him throws out names and numbers. Ownership wants playoff relevance. The fan base wants belief. The players want to know the organization will do everything to win. And yet there's a clock that makes fantasy and hope secondary. The league trade deadline is cruel and indifferent. This is the moment where context matters. The Bears aren't just trading for bodies. They're trading for fit, for chemistry, for cap compatibility. If you pry open the roster and look under the hood, you see a team that invested heavily in character and potential across the defensive front, but injuries have forced those plans into emergency rerouting. The decision here will define the tone of the next 2 months. Do you push for an aggressive ad, throw draft capital at a veteran, and chase a playoff push now? Or do you bunker, preserve assets, and crew the rebuild according to the patience that the front office promises but the fan base may not have time for? And while executives debate, life in the locker room goes on. Young players must step up. Coaches must adjust schemes and blitz packages. The burden on Sweat grows. Ben Johnson's defense will have to be more clever with fronts and pressures to compensate for the loss of physical depth. The film room will be busy and the nights will be longer. The fans, the ones who wake up to Chicago weather and come out to stadiums still believing in grit, will watch every rep and weigh every decision. Because in this city, in this era of the monsters of the Midway, you don't get to forget the value of the pass rush. It is both fundamental and symbolic. And losing a piece like Odeyingbo leaves a hole the Bears must now decide how to fill. So what comes next? The immediate hours after a season-ending injury are negotiation theater and media pressure. Phone calls go to rival GMs, coaches call agents. Scouts comb the waiver wire. The Bears' front office, between cap analysts and the most pragmatic of football minds, will sketch scenarios. Push for Hendrickson and pay the price in picks. Make an aggressive offer for Thibodeaux and hope talent outweighs cost. Or pivot to a veteran who can plug in for now while preserving future drafts. There is another factor that rarely makes headlines but matters profoundly: the locker room temperature. Will a big-name acquisition in mid-season energize the defense and signal to the team that ownership is committed? Or will the price of a first-rounder for a rental player create long-term headaches? The answer depends on how management values the present versus the future, and how much faith Ben Johnson has in his scheme and the bodies already acclimating to it. Ben Johnson, as head coach, wears multiple hats. He's an architect, a leader, and today a crisis manager. He has to reassure his locker room that the next man up will be prepared. He has to make the case to ownership that a trade is either necessary or wasteful. His public posture will be measured. He'll praise Austin Booker. He'll underscore Montez Sweat's leadership. But behind closed doors, the calculus is more granular. Does this roster, as constructed, give the Bears a sustainable edge in November and December? Are the replacements on the practice squad and IR realistic contributors when the line of scrimmage starts to decide games? You can imagine lines of conversation that matter. How quickly does a new veteran fit into the rotation? What snaps does he eat? Will he be a situational pass rusher or a two-gapping end? How do the Bears preserve interior rush while bolstering the edges? Football is a web, not isolated parts. Move one piece and several others shift in response. Fans will ask for names, and some will suggest trading the farm for a ready-made star. Others will beg the front office to hold firm and trust the scouting process. That vocal friction is part of what makes Bears fandom both passionate and exhausting. A timeline springs up in the mind, the deadline at 4 p.m. ET. The trade call is made, phones ping, tweets explode. And then the result, whether it's a deal that moves the needle or a press release stating no trade, reorients expectations. If the Bears pull the trigger on a name like Hendrickson, they immediately change the opponent's scouting reports. Suddenly, offenses must plan for a second credible edge. That could open up sweeps, play-action lanes, and secondary blitzes that Ben Johnson wants to leverage. Conversely, if Chicago lands a player like Jermaine Johnson II or Dremont Jones, the move may be less headline-grabbing but more consistent with a pragmatic roster that thinks in terms of depth and cap flexibility. And then there's Austin Booker. His strip sack wasn't just a highlight. It was evidence that this roster still contains untapped game-changing talent. Booker's rapid grading by PFF shows that when he plays at his ceiling, he's a real difference-maker. Chicago's coaching staff must now decide how to allocate reps and design packages that maximize his strengths while keeping him fresh. Can he handle a higher snap count? Can he maintain efficiency against double teams? The answers to those questions will shape whether the Bears feel compelled to acquire external help. Another wrinkle is how offensive coordinators will react. Opposing teams will watch Booker's film and adjust protections accordingly. They'll test Daniel Hardy. They'll scheme to slow Montez Sweat's momentum. The chess match intensifies when personnel change. Ben Johnson can draw up the plan, but the results happen in microseconds on game day. Beyond the tactical, there's a human story. Odeyingbo's injury is personal. It's time lost. It's therapy appointments and rehab timelines. For a player who signed with Chicago with ambitions to be a season changer, this is a cruel detour. Teammates will rally. There will be messages from coaches and fans. There will be a void in the locker room, a spot in the rotation that feels physically and emotionally absent. The way a team responds to that loss in the short term often defines its character. Does it fold, or does it find new ways to grind and scratch in games? This is also an audit of the front office's earlier decisions. Money committed to Odeyingbo, Sweat, draft choices, coaching hires, all of it is under scrutiny when injuries strike. Critics will ask if the roster construction was too optimistic. Supporters will point to the steps forward and remind fans that football is a long season littered with the unexpected. The best teams respond with balance. They address weaknesses aggressively when possible, and they develop internal answers when trades are impractical. What should fans expect in the coming days? A flurry of rumor and possibility. Likely a few serious calls, maybe a small move, maybe nothing, but don't expect panic from the Bears. This organization built a philosophy around process. If they move, it will be deliberate. If they don't, they'll explain why. In the meantime, the players already here must scramble to fill the gap. Coaches must scribble new game plans. Ben Johnson must steady the ship. At the end of the day, football in Chicago has always been about grit and rebirth. The season is far from over. The division is still within reach. But this injury is a test of the front office's courage, of the coaching staff's creativity, and of the locker room's resolve. Monsters of the Midway doesn't just refer to a badge or a chant, it's a standard. It's about meeting adversity head-on and refusing to get bowed by it. So the narrative shifts, from disappointment to a moment of decision, from a single injured player to a full team reckoning. For Ben Johnson and this Bears roster, the next 72 hours will tell us whether they chase bold moves or trust the work they've already put in. For fans, it will feel like a series of small choices that add up to the identity of this season. Hold your breath, but also know this: in Chicago, hope is stubborn. The work continues, and the monsters of the Midway are not done fighting.